Welcome to part 44 of the Basic Training Booster Pass Edition. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play Piranha Plant Cove on 150cc. The recommended build for this track is going to be our usual Peachette, Rollers, and Paper Glider, but with Streetle instead of Teddy Buggy for the increased water stats. Fair warning, this is one of the most difficult courses in the wave, and unlike most other tracks I've said that for, there's really not much of a way to make this one very easy. Things start off simple enough with a couple of mini turbos and a mini turbo trick off the pillar, and then we immediately jump face first into bullcrap. It looks like we're just tricking off the stairs a couple of times and then tricking off the ramp at the end, but there is just so much more going on under the hood here. The first thing is the trick off the water jet. We want to jump just before doing the trick because this will help us get back down to the track more quickly. We also want to be holding up on the joystick because this will make us do an up trick that will delay the trick boost until after the animation is done. This is important because that boost will give us a ton of forward momentum for the first stair trick, and it saves a couple tenths of a second. Then after the second stair trick, we want to land in a right drift and try to time things out so that we press the trick button as soon as the trick boost runs out. This weird little drift trick is called a Kusan trick, and I've got a whole video explaining why it works that I'll link to in the description. Now if you did the Kusan trick, then follow it up with a left drift, and then a right drift, and then one more right drift off the top of the stairs before going into the underwater section. If you didn't do the Kusan trick, then drive straight and just right drift directly off the ramp. The way to do this shortcut is to hold right and down on the joystick so that you can aim to land on top of this giant underwater tangerine, and then tighten up even more after bouncing off of it, making sure to avoid the coral right above you. You want to keep holding down on the joystick though, because what we're trying to do is get an Ultra Mini Turbo, do a single hop to release it, and then jump one more time to start a right drift, landing on the track right after the off-road. The shortcut itself isn't that hard to execute properly, but as you'll have probably noticed, you can't actually see anything until you've already drifted off the ramp, which means that we need to be set up properly for this cut before we can actually see it. This is going to be a common theme throughout this track, so just be prepared. After the cut, we're going to do some snaking before tricking off the ramp, and then we're going to do a wide left drift to build up a Super Mini Turbo. Once we release, we're going to do a left hop into a left drift and do some more snaking before grabbing the rightmost coin off the glider and doing some glider vectoring. If you go too far to the left, you'll lose a shitload of time trying to course correct, so make sure that you're in a good position before going off that glider. Now let's take a step back. I didn't explain the snaking very much because if you already know how to snake drift, then you should be able to figure out the positioning on your own. But if you don't have good soft drifting, which is required for that to actually work in the first place, you're not going to be able to do it properly, in which case you can just ignore the final drift in each of those sets of snake drifts like you can see on screen here. In either case, after we go off the glider, we're going to make our way to the right-hand side of the track, and then the second Shroomless shortcut. Like the first, it's really not that hard, despite the fact that it looks crazy as hell. All you're doing is just kind of holding right and down on the joystick in such a way that you stay as close to the rock wall as possible, only moving back to the track when you come to the right turn. Do a right jump to release the Ultra Mini Turbo to course correct a little bit, and then follow it up with a couple of drifts to finish up the lap. As we move on to lap 2, we're going to do a bit more snaking, but unlike before, we're not really soft drifting here. It's more like start the drift and then go wide until you get the Mini Turbo, and then just release, rinse, and repeat. Lap 2 itself starts the same as lap 1 with the up trick into the 2 tricks off the stairs, but now we're going to land in a left drift. This next set of strategies requires good soft drifting, and what you're going to want to do is build up a Super Mini Turbo and then do 2 right hops into a left drift to Mini Turbo trick off the ramp. Those 2 right hops are necessary because they fix our alignment in such a way that we can soft drift for a bit to build up that Mini Turbo without running into the wall. It can be a bit precise though, so if that's giving you trouble, then just ignore the Mini Turbo trick and instead just drive straight. In either case, we're going to do another up trick off of this ramp before doing another left drift and going up the stairs. After that, we are on to the final Shroomless shortcut of the run. And man, oh man, do I have a lot to say about this one. Let's start with how to do it. Step 1. Build up a Mini Turbo around this left turn. Step 2. Move towards the middle coin. Step 3. Shake your controller to trick. You must shake to trick as early as possible. This is because in Step 4, we're going to land in a left drift off of the second ramp, again holding a down and right angle on the joystick to force our cart to take advantage of the underwater physics and aim for this gap in between the coral and the wall. Now, I'm going to be real. Once you figure the shortcut out, it's really not that hard to do. But despite all that, words cannot convey how much I hate this thing. I'll explain more in my track summary, but amazingly enough, I have so many issues with this track that I can't fit all of it into the 2 minutes or so that it takes me to get through the track, so I'm going to make a quick digression here. By far the most frustrating thing about this shortcut is that you need to be set up in the right position and the right angle before grabbing the coin. As you can probably tell, you can't actually see the goddamn shortcut right now, which means you kind of just have to develop the muscle memory through failed attempt after excruciating failed attempt. This is also true to some extent with the first shortcut, but that one at least has the common decency to show up within the first 15 seconds of the run, and so failures on that one really aren't all that painful. The problem is that this final shortcut doesn't show up until you're more than halfway done with the run, making each failed attempt to get the right positioning about as soul-crushing as some of the worst that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has to offer. But believe it or not, we're still not done with the bullshit, although thankfully we do have about 15 seconds of downtime. After the shortcut, release the Super Mini Turbo just before landing and then drive to the left, tricking off the edge of the platform after the first thwomp. Hit the boost pad and then do a left jump while going up the next ramp so that you can trick and land in a tight left drift to take as close of a line around the turn as possible. We're on to lap 3 now, and with it comes the second long rant of the video. I'm going to pause for a second here. If you haven't played the track yet, take a quick guess as to which way we're supposed to go after this hill. You could be forgiven for thinking that we're going to have to turn right since that's where this second set of arrows is pointing, but you would be incorrect. Instead, what we're going to want to do is start a left drift as soon as we pass this first coin, and then we're going to just hold that drift, widening up until we get the tiniest bit of airtime off the track and then tightening up to help us build a Super Mini Turbo. Now at this point, I've got to ask, did the developers realize how ridiculously unhelpful it is to design a track where we literally can't see the path forward and then place arrows on it that point to the right when the track actually turns left? They did this same thing in Rome Avanti with the roundabout, and I realized that the point of these arrows is to block off paths that are only supposed to be opened up on certain laps, but then just block them off with actual walls. And I know they can do that because they do this exact same thing on Calamari Desert. Yeah, it looks kind of silly when you're not on the same lap as everybody else, but I'll take that over literally being lied to about where we need to go next. Anyways, let's move on because we're almost done. After that Super Mini Turbo, mushroom through the off-road and trick off the first ramp, landing in a left drift to build a Super Mini Turbo off the second ramp. Start another left drift to build another Super Mini Turbo around the next blind turn, and then we're more or less good to go after this. The only other tricky thing we need to learn is the mushroom cut. Once you've used your mushroom, do not tighten up until after going off the platform so that you can charge an Ultra Mini Turbo before landing. After that, it's one more Super Mini Turbo around the left turn, a couple of right drifts, and we will finally come to the end of this nightmare of a track. Almost. Let's talk about the world record for a bit here. I'm currently 6 seconds off the current world record, but surprisingly enough, if you compare my splits to theirs, you'll see that 4 of those seconds come from lap 1. So just what the hell went wrong? Well, remember that silly looking shortcut towards the end of the lap where we had to go over the rock wall? Here's how they do it. They motion glider, land in an early right drift, mushroom, and then mini turbo trick off the ramp, intentionally bonk the wall, and yet still somehow through black magic still land on this tiny platform here, and then they right drift off of it. This lets them keep a bunch of height to go completely over the rock wall where we had to go around a big portion of it. This version of the cut saves about 1.5 seconds over my version, but I found this incredibly difficult to do, as in after 2 hours of attempts, I didn't even get close to it a single time. And even if I could have gotten it, I'd still not recommend that you learn it yourselves because there's literally 0 chance of being able to do this online. So, tutorial's over. Let's talk about the track a bit more while checking out my current personal best. And as always, if you got something helpful or entertaining out of this video, I went through a lot of trials, literally, and tribulations to get this one together for you all, so, help your boy out with some likes and comments for the algorithm. My aching hand really thanks you for it. Now, Piranha Plant Cove. Remember how I called Rome Avanti one of the worst tracks in the game from a visual standpoint because of things like blind turns and arrows that don't actually tell you where you're supposed to go? Well, crank that up by a factor of 11, throw some water physics into the mix, and you end up with Piranha Plant Cove. Now look, I already spent a boatload of time complaining about the track, and I don't want to turn this video into just another wine festival, so let me first talk about what I mean when I say that I think a track is well designed. For me, it comes down to 2 things. Can a player make it through the track on their first couple of go-arounds with minimal confusion, and does the track offer interesting tech that is consistently doable on any given attempt? Piranha Plant Cove meets the second criteria, more or less, but absolutely shits the bed on the first. And to be honest, once you've hammered your approach out, the execution really isn't that bad. The thing is though that for pretty much every other track in the game, you can put together a kind of janky run, figure out which parts you need to work on, and then iterate slowly from there. That's basically how I've approached every one of my tutorials, including Madrid Drive, which is coming up next. For Piranha Plant Cove, on the other hand, every time you make a little bit of progress through one bit of the track, you're immediately greeted by yet another obstacle whose sole purpose seems to be to cause you to screw up and reset over and over and over again. This design choice rears its head abundantly in Section 3, which is made up almost entirely of major changes in elevation that obscure your vision of awkwardly laid out turns that follow, thus preventing you from actually figuring out what it is you need to be doing until it's already way too late. What this all means is that there's no such thing as an okay Piranha Plant Cove run. You've either grinded out the track enough to memorize the layout, or you're like 40 seconds behind record. There's no in between. But, you know, we're finally done with it, and every course from here on out is awesome, so looking forward to walking you through them. And that's everything you need to know to play Piranha Plant Cove on 150cc. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell before you go so that you can be notified about all my videos as soon as they drop. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next video.